Hi there, this is Matt Allington. It's update number 14, Tuesday the 28th of December. Three links on the screen, the videos, the interactive report, and also details on how to learn how to build Power BI reports like I'm going to show you today. So today there is some good news. I'll go through that in a moment. I will say I was up at Big Bend yesterday and took a couple of photos. So I'll just show you where we're at. So here are the three shacks closest to us. So this is our shack here. So we're about 50% under now, so very similar to the 74 levels, maybe just a fraction off. Paul and Lee's place here still got a little bit of clearance for their main living space. There's an outside chance it might not be too bad for them. I'll show you that in a minute. There is a bit of a split level in this property, so that this sort of outside living area here is a little bit lower, maybe the same height as the lounge room, and then the kitchen goes up a little bit. So there's an outside chance they might be okay. And yeah, the Dyson shack's pretty ordinary here. There are a couple of other shacks on location that are quite a bit higher. They've got about a metre and a half before it hits the top level. They are definitely going to be fine. So that's Penny Shack, also another one further up. I'm not sure, number 18 or number 19, something like that. I'm not really sure. Okay, the other thing that I did notice, I went to Blanchetown yesterday and I noticed that the Lock 1 is completely overrun by water. So this is why Lock 1 is not showing any recording of flow rates at the moment. You just can't even see it. The water's just going straight over the top. So that's happening at Blanchetown. So let's jump over and have a look at the report. Okay, so here we are looking at the lock map. Now this is important today because the news coming from SA Water and the water authorities is that the flow into SA has peaked, and I believe also the flow at Renmark. And you can see that Renmark, the lock here, I think this is, it's lock 5 at Renmark, says 6. Not really sure where these dots apply, but it says that lock 5 is Renmark. But anyway, the flow into SA has peaked, and they're saying that Renmark has also peaked in the last day or so. And so that's good news, and indeed there'll be some other good news as I get into the detail of that, so just keep that in mind. So let's have a look at the lower system view, and as I mentioned before, it appears that flow to SA has peaked. You can see here the peak was nearly 186 gigalitres. It's currently at 177, and so you can see it actually peaked about 5 days ago, 4 or 5 days ago. This is flow to SA. I'm guessing there might be a delay by a day or so into Renmark at Lock 5. And so certainly good news there. Now, the other good news is that the peak is 185, not 238. Now, I know a few people have been saying that they didn't believe that that whole 238 from Lock 10 would come into SA, or certainly not as flow down the Murray. So, you know, well done you for picking that. I was looking at the data here, and I can see that in 2016, pretty much everything came down. And if you look at what happened in 93, there was that similar sort of pattern where not all the water came down. So it would appear, based on this, that once you get up over 100, 110 gigalitres per day or so, the water goes out into the backwaters around Renmark and wherever else it is upstream. And so instead of all of that water coming down at once, it goes out laterally. And then, of course, once the water flows through, the water will come back in. And that will have the effect of holding the high level mark in the lower reaches for a lot longer than it did, say, at Lock 10. So we could expect to see an extended high period downstream. Yeah, so that's very good news that we're at 186 peak. Now that, of course, that's got to come down. Now remember that Lock 1 is not recording flow, so we'll go and have a look at that in a second. But you can see that this is basically the same height as 74. Sorry, this is basically the same flow as 74, and therefore it's reasonable to expect that we'll get a similar height as we had in 74. Now, in order to understand how much higher it's going to go, we need to know what is the flow through Lock 1 at the moment. Well, we don't have the flow, but I do have this little tool that I built the other day where I've got the SA to Lock 1 overlay. So if I just reset this, you'll see that there is a delay. After the water comes through SA, there's a delay until it gets to Lock 1. And you can see that here, this was the last measurement we had on the 10th of December. And so I was playing around with this, and it roughly looks to me like it's a 14-day delay. So to me, based on the data I have available, it appears to be 14 days between when the water leaves the flow to SA point, somewhere around Renmark, and hits Lock 1. And so the question is, as of today, what was the flow rate upstream 14 days ago? And that's what this little table does. And so this is telling me that 14 days ago at flow to SA it was 170, and that says to me we're getting 170 gigalitres per day through Lock 1 at the moment, and therefore flowing down to Big Bend. And so that suggests that we don't have a great deal of additional water to come, maybe about 15 gigalitres, and I think that's very good news, certainly for those shacks that still have clearance on their top floor. Paul and Lee, I'm not so sure. You might be lucky to get away. Of course, once the water breaches the lowest level of the floor, it gets into your drywall and everything and causes all these problems. But to me, it looks like there's only another 15 gigalitres per day. And it's very hard to project what that's going to mean in height. I mean, if you go back sort of 15 gigalitres, so back to here. So on the 7th of December up to the date up here, the 14th. So over the week, it's gone up 15 gigalitres. But of course, it depends on the contour of the land, which could be very different at this point than it was for that height change previously. Now, before I move off this chart, there's one more important thing to do. And so I'm saying about a 14-day delay from flow to SA. But you can see that the peak here, or sorry, 14 days ago, we're at 170 gigalitres, and we know the peak now is 185.86, this one here. And so 14, so it looks to me like it's 9 days away. So 9 days before we'll have the peak at Lock 1. And so today's the 28th, so 31st, so if I'm not mistaken, around the 6th or the 7th of January, we should see the peak at Lock 1, and presumably around that time, maybe a day later, we'll see the peak at Big Bend. I want to show you this particular view that I'm showing here now, where it's got the Swan Reach level and the Lock 1 level. Swan Reach certainly doesn't seem to have changed much since last time I was there about a week ago. It says that the levels come down. I don't know whether that's a measuring issue or whether that's actually happened, but I guess you can assume that the water will come down from Swan Reach at similar levels. Now, it may be worth just having a look at the water that's upstream. And so this is the Darling River. You recall that we had that big peak up at Burke going back late November. You can see that that water is now at the Wilcannia area here. So the water does go into all sorts of directions in here, and there's lakes and things going on. But there's 104 gigalitres per day coming through this region. So it still looks like it's a fair way off before it comes into Wentworth is Lock 10. So that water is quite a long way away, but based on that sort of amount of water coming, there may be another peak. I don't believe it's going to be as big as the one that we've got now, but what it will do is will extend the period of flooding, and it could make the period of recovery a little bit delayed, particularly for those people with lower level flooding. If we have a look at the Lachlan, someone did post to say that the Lachlan River doesn't basically feed into the Murrumbidgee anyway, and I have talked on a number of occasions about this wetland area here. It just seems to sort of spread out. So it looks like no threat coming from the Lachlan River, certainly no threat to the Murray. If we have a look at what's going on here, you can see there's sort of 40 gigalitres at Balranald. So this is starting to feed into, I'm not sure if it's Wackle Junction or the Murray, but this water is certainly going to come in, but once again, not in huge volumes. And then if we have a look at what's upstream at the Murray, you can see that this has already come off, and this is the reasons why we're seeing the peak in the Murray now. But once that extra water comes from the Darling and also from the Murrumbidgee, we'll see it go back up again. But from what I'm seeing, it's not going to peak. So that's pretty much it for the update for today. So probably by the time I give my next update, we would be seeing the peak coming through Lock 1 and Big Bend. But the good news is certainly those shacks that have got a metre and a half space before they hit the top floor, no chance that you're going to go under. Paul and Lee, our fingers are crossed. Hopefully, it won't get into your kitchen and main living area, and we'll see what happens.